Welcome everybody. I'm Trip Anderson, the Executive Director here. Nice to see so many faces, and I'm sure we're all anxious to hear what Janet has to say today. I'm sure it'll be a very interesting talk. Thank you for coming to AVA. It's wonderful that you're all here and that we can host these events and hold these wonderful exhibitions. I've got to put a pitch in for all our education classes and our outreach programming that goes on here on a weekly basis. Very special announcement this fall. I'm very proud to say that all of our outreach programming, the programs that happen for special targeted audiences on every day of the week, basically, on a weekly basis, are now free for all participants. So Senior Art, Art Lab, Art Stop, Fiber Studio, Chaos for Toddlers, Chaos for Family, and even the Sunday monthly program, Art for Kids, are all free for all participants thanks to our many benefactors and granting foundations. But welcome to all of you. It's my pleasure to introduce our exhibition manager who plans and hangs all these things, Mila Pinnigan, and Mila will introduce you to Janet. So Mila.
Hi everybody. Oh yeah, come on in. Yeah, find the spot. So first I need to state the obvious. We are in the Wenberg Gallery. The work in here is of Lauren Gillette. We will be speaking with Janet Van Fleet, and her work is in the Mayer Gallery. So if you haven't already taken a look, please do after the talk, and perhaps some of your questions will drive us into that gallery. But in order for us to be able to sit comfortably, we're in here for the talk portion, okay? It has been such a pleasure working with Janet on this show. She is one of the founders of Studio Place Arts in Barre, Vermont. She has been awarded several prestigious grants from the Vermont Council of the Arts. And if you haven't gotten enough of her work, which I don't know how you could, she will also be exhibiting in the Vermont Supreme Court Gallery next year, April through June. So I encourage you all to take a trip up to Montpelier and check that out. What I love about Janet's work is that it just is both playful and poignant at the same time. And each time I go in there, it's like a whole other world. All of these, slightly moving boxes, meticulously created, and I always find something new, even though it's been here for several weeks now. So thank you, Janet, for sharing your work with us, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mila and Trip. And thank you all for coming. It's nice to see you here. It's been such a treat, really, exhibiting here at AVA, which is very similar in many ways to Studio Place Arts in Barre, which is where I have my studio. And actually have a person here from SPA who has the studio right underneath me. It's Bob Karen Henderson, sitting right behind Mila. But I really especially want to thank Mila and Jan for hanging the show. If you haven't seen it yet and are going to see it after this, it was a magnificent job of installation to hang these 11 pieces from the ceiling in the wonderful way that they did. Beautifully installed, and I'm very grateful. Thank you. So my intention is to talk for about 10 minutes and then open it up for questions and comments, after which I'd be really happy to take people into the exhibition space and talk about what is in there and about kind of wend our way through the thicket of the sculpture. And there's a lot going on in each of those sculptures, and I have lots of things to say about the materials and the construction and what I was thinking about in each piece, which I would be happy to share with you. So the working title for today's talk is Why Do They Do It? The it being art. This is, interestingly, a two-pronged question. And I'm going to try something here that I understand is done in sign language, that when you're speaking in sign language, you can take an idea or a person and place it in space here or there, and then make reference to it as you continue, so that you don't have to keep saying it. You can kind of point to the spot where the thing or the idea is. So we're going to try that. And we'll see. I'll return to it later in my talk. You can keep looking to see whether I'm bringing up something that I mentioned previously. So, okay, question number one is, why do artists make art? Is there a common experience for artists with respect to their impulse to make this thing we call art? And specifically for me, what in me or in my background has led me to this place? The second question about why artists do it is a cultural question. What is the function of art in the world? And does the world want or need art? And if so, why do we, artists, do it for public consumption? So these are kind of big questions, right? Many of you may have speculated about these questions previously, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts about it. But I have talked about the artist why question with lots of artists. And the consensus seems to be that artists feel that they have to make art. It's something they are somehow compelled to do. It's something that they cannot not do. For myself, I've always made things, fiddled with things, put stuff together with other stuff, and who knows whether this is influenced by nature or nurture or both, though I have thought about it. My mother, when she was a girl, floated down the St. Johns River in Jacksonville, Florida, in a boat that she made out of a bent Coca-Cola sign with 2x4s in the front and the back and caulked with stolen tar. And later, as a young mother, when my naval officer father was gone for extended periods, she built a Heathkit amplifier and phonograph, and block printed her own drapes. And after my father died, testing a plane, she remarried an artist in Santa Fe named John McKinney, who was an adobe builder. He made doors and furniture out of weathered and salvaged wood, which is kind of a lot of the materials I use too. And in one of his more outrageous projects, he took all the doors off the kitchen cabinets in a house that they had just built or that they had just bought and completely changed them by using a scroll saw to create lines and to cut shapes that were then backed by different colors of burlap. It was very cool. I describe these things because I think it's important to point out that making, actually using your hands and tools to make an object, whether it's a two-dimensional or a three-dimensional object, is the most basic reality and requirement in the production of art. As I was growing up, I was surrounded by people in Santa Fe who made things. Houses, sculptures, poems, music, theater, and food. And many, many people now seem to live in a virtual world where there's an electronic interface between them and the physical world. Many people don't make anything at all, even food. And now, the cultural question about what the function of art might be in the world. When I was growing up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there were 3 ethnic/cultural groups in the community: Native American, Indian, Hispanic, Mexicans, and Anglo or Gringo people. And each had a very strong visual arts presence there. The Native Americans made turquoise and silver jewelry, clay vessels, and did weaving and some traditional leather crafts. The Hispanic community's primary artworks were Santos and Cristos, and the Anglos, mostly imported from other parts of the United States, were those artists on Canyon Road. What was the social value for the artwork in each of these arenas? Of course, commerce, the exchange of money for art goods, is the most obvious and easiest measure to quantify. And each of these three groups had pride in their own work and they found it valued in the marketplace as well. But is it just about money and about the desire to possess objects? Or is there something about this category of goods we call art that is as necessary and compelling for the observer as it is for the artist? Yes, I believe that art speaks to viewers in symbolic, elusive, and nonverbal ways that bring artist and viewer together in a kind of embrace in a shared space between them. Which brings us back to the importance of making, the artist forming, painting, pressing a print. So just as the physical body of the beloved is enrapturing, it is the hand of the artist, the physical hand of another human being present in the art object that catalyzes this embrace. This is what makes an original artwork, seen in its original form, different from a reproduction, whether a digital or 3D print or online image. It is as though there's still some kind of art pheromones attached to the object that are dispersed. I have sometimes thought that the fact that so many of us live through the intermediary of digital technology and have experiences that are pretty exclusively in our heads may explain the ascendancy of conceptual art, in which the object is of no importance itself, and both the artist and viewer are sealed in private bubbles of deconstruction. For my own part, I love stuff. I love picking it up, attaching it to other stuff, feeling its resistance, and then watching it rust or fray or crumble into dust, which is the common fate of all stuff, even the stuff of us. Art, for me, is not about eternity. It is about a way of being present right now in the world. Artists make art in order to try to be awake and alive. And the function of art is to offer the same opportunity to others. So that's what I have to say. I didn't see that Hannah, another artist from Studio Place Arts, is sitting right in front of me. There she is. So we're represented by two persons. So if there are any comments or questions, I would be more than happy to engage with whoever wants to step forward and say something. Yes?
How do you get started?
How do I get started? Well, I'm always started, I guess. Mostly, especially with three-dimensional work. I'm always very aware of what's around me. You'll notice that most of the things I've used are found objects, and so I have to find them. That means that every time I'm out walking around, here's an interesting thing to observe. I've been told that there are two kinds of people. There are the kinds of people whose eyes are on the horizon, who have the long view. And then there are the people who are looking down at their feet. And I'm that second person, because I'm always looking down at my feet, looking for rusty bits of metal or interesting pieces of wood or whatever. So that's part of it. I mean, the experience I actually have when I do that is that it's as though things just leap into my hands. I mean, there's something that needs to that needs to be used, and so I'm always accumulating bits and pieces and random flotsam and jetsam of my my world. So, yeah. Yes?
Some writers experience writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
Having a comparable experience.
I don't think I do, because I don't know how it is for writers, but for a studio artist, really all you have to do is start playing. You know, you just go in and start messing around with stuff. I think, you know, in The Wind in the Willows, and they say, messing about in boats. Well, this is messing about with stuff. And as soon as you go in and you kind of start sifting through your stuff, it starts to aggregate and create that. So, and also I happen to be, for better or for worse, a person who has, who does a lot of different kinds of artwork. I've been known to paint. I make three-dimensional work. I have worked with, sometimes I do a bit of photography, not usually my own, but I often use found photographs as found objects. So there's always some new toy that I can pick up and get my teeth into.
I noticed that many of your pieces have a political bent.
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I guess I do in a way. I mean, I feel strongly that more than a little bit is awry in the world, and that I somehow have, well, I don't even know if I want to say I have a responsibility, but I feel like the impulse to make art, my impulse to comment and to be aware and concerned about what's happening in the world is always with me. But at the same time, I want to say that I don't want my work to be polemical. I would not like to feel that that it is didactic, that I am somehow that there's not more than one way to understand and interpret it. And I have a favorite story that I would like to tell about that. During the war in Kosovo, which is many decades ago now, I had a piece, well, there were artists in Montpelier who often made guerrilla installations of art in the river that flows under State Street, the Winooski River. And it's really easy to get into the river. The river is extremely shallow, so you can kind of go up the river a little bit and get in the river and walk down. And so I decided to do an installation in the river that was about the war. And there was a kind of a piece of plywood like this, and it had three figures on it. And there were two figures standing up and looking up at the sky, holding their arms up, and another one kind of lying on the ground. And so I installed this and anchored it to a block in the river, and it bobbed around right under the bridge on Langdon Street. And so I knew that people would throw bottles at it, that they would bomb it essentially, which was exactly what was going on in the world. So I thought, wow, that's going to be so great. So in fact, people did bomb it, and they threw things at it and broke the pieces off it and so on. Well, I was sitting in a restaurant called the Horn of the Moon, which is no longer there, right next to the bridge, having a cup of coffee, and somebody came in and said, "Are you the woman who did the baseball sculpture in the river?" And I said, "Baseball sculpture?" "Yeah, that one. There's like, the guy is sliding it to home, and the two umps are saying, 'Safe!'" So, it doesn't get better than that, you guys. It really doesn't. So, I hope that there's more than one way to look at everything. Hannah?
I was going to ask you if in your collecting, when you're putting together your materials, do you find that you try to use material from the same place? Like, is there any kind of allegiance to the place?
No, none whatsoever. I am absolutely without any scruples whatsoever in that respect. In fact, I kind of like using, a variety of things, and that something from over here is like partnering up with something from a completely different zone. I like that. Yes?
I'm curious, I love the piece baggage,
Yes.
and I'm curious if you had the conception for that first, and then started collecting the stuff to go in it, or if you collected the stuff and then said, aha, this is how I'm gonna use it.
No, I think in that case I did have the idea first, but all the little bits and pieces. So some pieces I knew went in there, and others I had to scrounge around for. And then another person from SPA, came into me with that wonderful piece of glass on the front, which kind of it feels like a torch, kind of lighting the way into the underworld. I did when I first started making art professionally, over about 25 years ago, I worked on a piece called A Guided Tour of Dante's Inferno, which was a huge walk-in installation. And it was like 9 feet tall and 12 feet wide, and it was circular. And you'd walk in there, and there was a central pole like this holding up the structure. And there were rings on it that had arms hanging off of them, made with white kid gloves, and inside it was an armature. So those were Virgil's hands, and you were Dante going through the underworld. Of course, Virgil guided Dante through the underworld and down through the many circles of hell, 9 circles until they got to the bottom. In any case, so I often think about that trope or the idea of the boat gliding into the underworld. And I think that's what I was thinking about when I started on baggage. But if you guys would like to accompany me into the exhibit afterwards, I'll tell you where all the different things came from, because it was really fascinating how the pieces came together. Yeah?
Do people ever give you their, like, family mementos or their stuff, thinking?
Yes, people do. I have had people give me family photographs several times, because I do things with photographs too, with both 19th and early 20th century albumin prints, which I think are very wonderful, that I shamelessly modify and add things to. And also I use 20th century black and white, early 20th century and mid-century black and white photographs. So I have gotten those from people. A dear friend of mine who died a couple of years ago, and there's a piece here, the illuminated piece is a memoriam or an homage to her. She, before she died, gave me some artifacts from her family that I have used sparingly in work that I've done. And I have in the past done a lot of work with buttons. I was for a while known as the button lady because I do lots of things with buttons. There's a piece in there that that's called Stromatolites for the Next Age, which has a lot of buttons in it. And I've made many large wall pieces, putting up to like 12 feet wide, of buttons and buttons that I make myself, and buttons that are antique and new buttons, and with all kinds of different materials. It's amazing the number of things that buttons are made out of. I once did a piece that is called Taxonomy, and it's one of the pieces in it is several, 6 maybe compartments of different kinds of buttons made out of different materials. There's bone and shell and wood and plastic and ceramic and glass. It's like, it's so wonderful. Buttons are great. But I digress. And was there anybody else who has a question or a comment?
I think we should go in.
Well, let's go. This piece is, I often use bones in my work, as you may observe. And I had wanted to make, I also like skeletons a lot. And I wanted to make a piece that was covered with metal, that I could have skeletons in, or a large kind of skeleton that I would make. And so I found a makerspace in Lincolnville called The Foundry, and there they had this incredibly wonderful equipment that allows you to do all kinds of things, among which is to form metal. So I have this aluminum flashing, and they had these big brakes. I don't know if you know what a brake is, but it's a machine that allows you to bend metal. So you're going to put it on there, and you kind of pull the lever down that bends the metal, but it bends it along a straight edge, so that it's really a nice clean bend, and you can get different angles of bend in it. So I was able to create this to line and cover this one of these same little pieces as the others. So it was really hard to know what to put in it. I used it for different things. I used it for a while for I filled it full of leaves and green material and kind of left it there with this opening here and let it desiccate and kind of turn different colors and dry. But then it was kind of boring after that. So this is the next iteration, and it's entirely possible that I could take this off, see if this comes up. Oh, actually, I did it at the front, which is the gallery that in Montpelier, and had a sort of weird stuffed, looked like a big larva of some kind, and it was dyed. So with bits of tea that made it look like dried blood. So that was in there for a while. So this is the most recent iteration of this piece. Okay, here we go. This one, I often use, it's 6 o'clock, so if anybody feels that they need, well, that's okay. Yeah, so we've only been here half an hour. I can carry on. These pieces are from a series that I did called Rolling Boil. And again, you were asking about the political nature of my work. Well, Rolling Boil was done at a time when I was really pissed. It was during the George Bush administration. And I was just really so distressed by the things that were going on in my name.
How do you feel now?
Oh, yeah, really. It just goes from bad to worse. It's unbelievable. So these pieces were about, and my current obsession is also kind of about animals and about how human beings are using all the resources of the planet and not really leaving any for other species. And so the role was called, I kind of thought it was rolling stock, that we just kind of think, well, you can just move animals over there. I mean, we don't actually have to kill them, we can just like relocate them. I was just reading an article in a science magazine I take that talked about when they find that this particular species they were investigating was bighorn sheep, some kind of a mountain sheep. And they relocated these animals and they discovered that they have culture, by which I mean that the animals over generations learn and share with their offspring the lay of the land. And so that allows them to know where to go up to higher pastures in the summertime when they need to find new browsing. But when we relocate animals, they lose their culture, they lose their collective memory. And so that the research showed that the animals would not go up as high as the animals had done previously. So we think that we're the only animals who learn and have culture, but it ain't so. So, there we go. And this one used to have a crank that allowed you to move this cart back and forth. So the title of this one is Railroaded. And now we have to do it by hand. Okay, here we go. But I think they're just beautiful. You know, they're not Cocoa Puffs. Even though they look like Cocoa Puffs. So this one, I guess, is pretty obvious. Black and white. And this one is kind of an image of a river in which all these things are floating down the river. And this long haul work, I think of it as it's really about the movement of time and the way things travel on the river of time. So this one. I very fond of this piece. I really want pages kind of thing. It has all kinds of kitchen implements. It has human figures of various kinds. It has incinerated forks and spoons. And, it has letters, clay letters.
Where did you get incinerated forks?
I took them and I put them in my wood stove. Voila, incinerated forks. Okay, this is a cool one. This one is called stromatolites for the next age. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that there are all these little figures and pails on these columns. Stromatolites were bacterial mats in the early life of our planet, and they're really, really fascinating. Back in the day, they believed that that the atmosphere of the Earth was not as it is now. It was primarily a methane atmosphere. And so everything that was alive on Earth then breathed metabolized methane. And these little stromatolites were these bacterial mats that slowly grew and changed over time, one of the earliest life forms. And what happened is that they did also use methane, but their byproduct, their waste product was oxygen. So slowly, as there were more and more of these puppies all over the world, they started to build up oxygen in the atmosphere, and there came a point at which there's something called the Great Oxygenation Event, where it just flips, so that we started having oxygen as a huge component of our atmosphere. And what happened as a result of that is that there was this huge die-off of all these species for whom oxygen was toxic. And they speculated that it was the greatest mass extinction event in the history of the planet. Like, all that stuff was just fried by the oxygen. And there was also something called like the Great Rust Event, so that all that oxygen started also rusting all the iron that was out and about. So when you see all these red rocks and so on, those were rusted essentially by the oxygen. In any case, it made it possible for us and all other oxygen-using life forms on the planet to exist. So the question to me is, what are the stromatolites for the next age? As we poison our atmosphere now and we create mass extinctions, what will arise to change the paradigm this time? So that's what this piece is about, with buttons. This one is called Brown's Burden, and it's, for me, about the burden of that those who bear the burden of militarism are the brown things of the earth, the animals and the brown people of the earth, who primarily are bearing the burden of this activity. And this piece is called 17, which is interesting. 17 is the number of syllables in a haiku. And I always think if I got it together, I would write a haiku for each one of these things, and that would be fun. So if anybody, you asked about writers, if you are inspired and moved to write a haiku for each of these objects, I would welcome it, and I will post it with these things next time I exhibit them. But I have posted somebody else's writings up on the wall along with this piece, which is a little excerpt from a poem by Wisława Szymborska, the Polish Nobel laureate. And she wrote the following: I am no longer sure whether what's important is more important than what's not important. And that's the way I feel about these objects, and how I feel about the stuff of the world. Pablo Neruda wrote this wonderful book about stuff. What's the name of that book? Things, and homage to things, and the celebration of the stuff of the world. All these things it's an interesting conundrum that most of the time our stuff lives on after we do. And of course, nothing lasts forever, even the stuff. But it probably, all that stuff is going to last longer than I am. Even if it goes in the dumpster, it'll last longer than I do in its current manifestation. Okay, there we go. And this piece is called Going Down. And what I have to say, I have several things to say about this piece, which are very cool. More bones. But these things, I should put my object in here. Several years ago, I was invited to participate in an exhibit at the Sullivan Museum, which is the museum of Norwich University, and they invited artists to come in and look at their stuff, their goodies that they had in their collection. And then the artists were asked to make a responsive piece, or a piece that responded to that object. So I looked around through the stuff, and I found this thing called a short snorter, which was a roll of bills. It was, it was much thicker than this, like around and around. I said, what is this? So I found it appealing. So, and there were like little notations on the bills in this wad of bills. Well, apparently in the Second World War, and maybe even in other earlier conflicts, there was a tradition among military men to collect the currency of whatever community they were in. And they take, so you take whatever it was and you pass it around among all the guys in your unit, and they sign it and often say what their hometown was and so on. And then they kind of tape them together and roll them up, and they keep it in their pocket. So, let's get that one on this. So they had it in their pockets, and when you'd go to the USO or out to a bar or whatever, you'd go up to one of the other enlisted men that you'd find there, not necessarily somebody in your unit, might be from some other place, and say, are you a short snorter? And the ritual response was, you bet your sweet ass I am. And at that point, everybody was obliged to take out their wad and open it up and compare it. And whoever was longest, or actually whoever was shortest, had to buy the drinks. So that's how it worked. So anyway, I thought, well, this is a military school, and so what am I going to do with this? So what I did was I put it out to all my artist friends if they would send me a bill with a message about peace on it. So they did, and that's what all these are. And this is only kind of a small part of it. And they were all hanging, again like this, from the ceiling, hanging this huge long thing all the way down to the floor with all these bills in it. So let's see, this one is, there are ones from different people, I think. This is what's from Mark Audi, who used to be the critic for 7 Days and died a few years ago. He says, France is strange. Even little kids speak French. And this one is one from my friend Emiko. She says, there's no good war, no killing. Emiko. So anyway, that's what these guys are. Let's see what else. Oh, this is a very cool thing. This is also from New Orleans. This is a Rolodex from the Gordon K. Allen Company, funeral coach headquarters to the southeast. And I bought this for $1 at a secondhand store in New Orleans. And I loved it, this idea of the Rolodex, the death Rolodex. So I decided that what I would do was I would, instead of having business cards in it, I'd have like little cards that would be business card, the size of a business card, but would have things having to do with death. So here we have crying, this is C, corpse, cemetery, casket. So each of these, you can look at the death Rolodex if you want. And last but not least, as we talk about death, this is the piece that I told you was in homage to my dear friend Margaret Trout. These X-rays are antique glass X-rays, which I found at a yard sale in Plainfield, and I just thought they were really incredibly cool. And so I wanted to make a piece to honor Marge, and so this has got LEDs in the bottom, and then it has 3 or 4 layers of gauze, of bandage gauze, that with bones in it, and that light is shining up through the gauze and the bones through the X-rays, and that's what it is. So you've had the guided tour of Janet's Inferno.